You have found the area's most in-depth weather forecast video. It's 21 News Chief Meteorologist Eric Wilhelm here with weather for Weather Geeks. It is a week before Christmas Eve, and it doesn't look like we're going to have a white Christmas this year, but we'll talk about some snow chances in the run-up to the holiday. Not real optimistic on snow itself for the holiday at this point, but we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about my thoughts, kind of reiterating what I talked about last evening on January's forecast. We're going to take a look at the heart of meteorological winter and where I think we are heading past the new year. And I want to continue keeping an eye on our temperature departure here in this month of December because, of course, the first 2 weeks of the month have featured a long stretch of colder than average temperatures and now a pretty consistent stretch of milder than average temperatures, dating back over the last week to almost 10 days at this point. Although today's high of 55, a little bit deceptive. That was just after midnight, but that still officially is our high for the day after 56 yesterday. We spent the afternoon in the 40s today. It was a beautiful afternoon, but that 55, a little bit deceiving today since that occurred just after the stroke of midnight. We're down to 1.6 degrees below the average for the month so far, and I'm becoming more and more convinced that December is going to be yet another warmer than average month, despite a cold snap we have coming at the end of this week and into the weekend. It seems likely to me that we're going to run the table and go 12 for 12 this year in 2024, every single month warmer than the average. Some months by bigger margins than others, but at the top of the list this year will be the month of February, and closely followed by March and April. The first part of the year, remarkably warm, of course, dating back to last winter. A little too early to speculate exactly what our December number will be, but it probably will end up, to my estimations, or guesstimations, if you will, without sitting down and putting pencil to paper and doing some really tough math. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up a degree or so warmer than the average for the month of December. It looks pretty mild in that week between Christmas and New Year's. In the meantime, we had a beautiful day today. A lot of sunshine. Now, this time lapse starts at 3 o'clock over the fairgrounds in Canfield, and we had some high clouds filtering the sun at that point. But it was a great-looking sunset and, a little taste of spring over the last couple of days. We had the rain yesterday, but with today's sunshine and temperatures in the 40s, it kind of felt like a early to mid-March day out there for today. And, the kind of day like we had today is a rare treat at this time of the year because, climatologically speaking, December is our cloudiest month. Just edging out January and February. December usually takes the cake as a pretty overcast month in Northeast Ohio and Western PA. We can largely thank our proximity to the Great Lakes for that. In December, the lakes are still holding some warmth, leftover warmth from the summer and early fall season, and then you have the colder air masses going over those lakes. That's a recipe for clouds. And so in winter, and especially in December, our part of the world tends to be a very, very cloudy place, one of the cloudiest places in the lower 48 states. In the meantime, there's not a lot of big weather happenings across the country on this Tuesday evening. A little bit of snow out across the Midwest. That's the system that's heading our way tomorrow. But that is about it. There's not a lot of barn burners out there today. That Midwest system will gain some strength over the overnight hours and into tomorrow morning, and I do think precipitation will start to spread in before the morning is through. Now, our model here, I'll back this up. Our model shows a whole lot of colors here. I think the model is overdoing the threat for freezing rain here a little bit. I think we'll slip maybe just below freezing briefly overnight, but I think once this rain starts to push in, we're going to be around 33, 34, 35 degrees. Not real concerned about ice problems tomorrow, but it'll be a cold rain and wet snowflakes mixed in, and just not a very nice midday and afternoon for our Wednesday. In the wake of that system passing by to our east, can be a couple of flurries then tomorrow night. Thursday is just kind of a ho-hum day in between systems, and here's our next weather maker coming down. It's a pretty potent-looking little clipper, although it's going to start to lose steam a little bit. A lot of times these clippers strengthen as they pinwheel through the Great Lakes. This one doesn't look too impressive to me as it approaches Thursday night into Friday, and I don't think this is not going to be one of those clippers that produces a swath of 2, 3, 4, even 5 inches of snow like some Alberta clipper systems can do. I think accumulations around here would be pretty modest. It may not be a whole lot more than a scattering of flurries across our area for Friday night into parts of Saturday. Here's one model depiction of snowfall totals coming up with that system, and just not a lot here locally. Could there be 2, 3, 4 inches of snow in Chicago, Milwaukee, Grand Rapids, Green Bay, places like that? Yes. And maybe even off to our east, there's some modest accumulations from Buffalo to Rochester, over to Albany, Binghamton, New York, places like that. But around here, just not real impressed with a whole lot of snow accumulations. So with that being said, we've gone ahead and adjusted downward our White Christmas chances. If you watched yesterday's video, I put the odds at 25%. I lowered them to 15% today because I don't think we're going to have accumulating snow Sunday, Monday, or on Christmas Eve, Tuesday. And with very little, or very modest accumulations with any flurries and snow showers at the end of the week and into the start of the upcoming weekend, going to have a hard time seeing an inch still on the ground in a lot of places by the time Christmas morning rolls around. In fact, we're 8 days out, so I went ahead and did an initial Christmas forecast today, and at this point it does not look very cold at all. I think we'll see a high of about 40-ish, 41 degrees on Christmas Day. Looks like there's going to be some sort of weak system passing through, and maybe it produces a rain or a wet snow shower. Could be kind of a day, sort of like tomorrow, actually. It doesn't look like a very strong system at this point, 8 days out. After Christmas, I do think it's going to warm up pretty significantly, and put on social media this morning the artificial intelligence version of the European model painted some highs in the 60s here locally by Saturday the 28th. Now, it's midday run today backed off a little bit on those lofty numbers, but the fact that some modeling is trying to produce that kind of warmth in that week between Christmas and New Year's just shows you it's going to be a pretty mild period, whatever the numbers end up being. All right, let's talk a little bit about the extended forecast here and what I think we have coming in January. Again, refer to my video last evening for a really geeky, meteorology discussion with regard to what's going on in the tropics and how that impacts the jet stream and therefore impacts the weather patterns over the North American continent. What we're looking at here is the GFS extended model showing the upper level flow averaged out over a month from the solstice in December to January the 20th. So a 1 month chunk here. And a couple of things stand out. One, you have a ridge trying to build back along the west coast. You have this deep vortex west of Alaska out across the Aleutian Islands. You have that ridge popping up along the west coast. You also have a vortex here over Hudson Bay. This is actually similar-ish to the pattern we've been in pretty consistently since about Thanksgiving. Now, the pattern started to break down some in recent days. That's why we've gotten warmer. But from Thanksgiving through early December, that was a pretty cold period here locally. And this pattern kind of resembles that a little bit. So I think the warmth that we've got coming at the end of the year is likely not going to continue very long into the new year. And here's another set of modeling. This is the European extended, and this basically covers all of January from the 1st right through the 31st. Similar idea here in that you've got a ridge centered along or just west of the west coast. Actually, the ridge centers a little bit farther west here on the European model as compared to the GFS. But you also have that Hudson Bay vortex. You could even argue this is a reflection of the polar vortex. There's two polar vortexes, or vortices, if you will. There's the stratospheric polar vortex. This is way up in the stratosphere. And then there's the what we call the tropospheric polar vortex, which is down here in the troposphere where our actual weather happens. And what we're looking at on the weather map here is the tropospheric polar vortex, kind of centered over Hudson Bay. And that's the kind of configuration that can produce some cold. And, a couple of the years that I think the pattern, the overall ingredients, what's going on in the atmosphere, and to some extent the oceans as well, I think there's a couple of years that closely or may closely resemble the start of 2025, and that would be January of 1981 and January of 2014. When you combine those 2 years, stitch them together and form a composite, you have your West Coast ridge out here. You have that big storm off the coast of Alaska near the Aleutian Islands. You also have a vortex. Now, in those 2 years, the vortex was farther to the south than was shown on the modeling I just showed you for next month. And so these were pretty extreme cold Januaries. I don't think we're likely to have an extreme cold January around here, but I do think we have a pretty good chance of seeing our first colder than average month in a good year and a half, and our coldest January since January of 2022. We've had warm Januaries the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024. January of 22, that was a warm winter overall, but January was actually pretty cold that year, at least at times. So I think this year will be our coldest January, or this coming January, I should say, will be our coldest one in a few years. It will probably not be as extreme, though, as a couple of those years I just showed you. Those are just years that I think bear some similarities in the overall atmospheric setup. We're going to talk a lot more about the longer range, of course, in future editions of Weather for Weather Geeks. Thanks for watching on this Tuesday evening. Have a great rest of your night. I'll see you back here on Wednesday.